way. Your job's a joke, you broke, your love life's the old way. It's like you're always stuck in second gear. When it hasn't been your day, or maybe your month, or even your year. But I'll be there for you.
Orale way! Welcome back to the Mexican Revolution, and now we are on the second stage of the revolution, when Huerta seizes power. So let's review last time. We talked about a man named Francisco Madero, and he was the one that ended, with the help of many others, the reign of Porfirio Diaz after 35 long years of subjecting the Mexican people to a horrible experience. But as soon as he had gotten power, he made a lot of wrong moves. For example, he pissed off Zapata. He tried to buy him off. He tried to get him a ranch instead of listening to the call of the people and doing land and labor reform like they wanted. And immediately Zapata would offer Orozco, which was Madero's general, a job which Orozco would probably take because he had the mind of the people too. He then pissed off Villa by choosing an anti-revolutionary commander, a porfirista named Victoriano Huerta. They got into an argument about a horse, if you remember last time, and eventually they tried to get Villa killed. Madero intervened and saved Villa's life, but that wouldn't stop Villa from raising an army of about 7,000 against both Madero and Huerta. And then eventually, as his popularity waned more and more, a coup d'etat was put forward behind his back. And of course, the spider in the corner of the room, the United States, played a bit of a role too. And Victoriano Huerta, Madero thought he was his general, but he actually backstabbed him and the vice president, assassinated them both. And after a turn of events, when we go a little bit more to the left with progressive democratic reforms, we go right back to the way that things were with a Porfirio Diaz-style ruler named Victoriano Huerta. And the military, the church, and the elite are super happy about this guy. The rest of us, though, think he's just a naco, as the Mexicans would say. So first, let's pause so you can copy what it was like under Huerta. All right, so once Huerta was the president, he made a lot of changes. Now remember, Madero did a great job of getting local officials to take control over the government. He believed in democracy, at least. That was his goal. He thought that if he got democracy in, then eventually economic and social problems would be fixed eventually. Huerta reversed all this. He put his military men back in power. He also demanded that every state governor, states just like ours, like Florida, Georgia, and there would be like Sonora, Morelos, that they all pledge recognition to Huerta. Those that didn't, three people had the actual, gaunt not to. They were thrown under trains. Okay, just to give you an idea of how fierce this guy was. He's kind of like a fascist, all right? He's trying to consolidate power through military and intimidation and fear to put Mexico down to her knees and make sure that the foreigners, the church, and the rich continue their Porfirio Diaz-like exploitative conditions once again. Now, the ambassadors from Europe and Latin America, they liked Huerta because they were being influenced by foreign companies who were excited to once again extract a lot of money and resources from the Mexican economy. They knew that if they supported Huerta, they'd be getting a lot of money. I mean, it's horrible for more reasons than one. This guy was just, bad news bears. So here we've got a cartoon of him finishing off both President Madero and his vice president. We can see that as soon as this is actually at the funeral of Madero, is where he made peace with Orozco. So one revolutionary down, plenty to go, and they were not happy with Huerta. But you know who else wasn't happy? Woodrow Wilson, our president from the north in the United States. So let's pause so you can copy this real quick. All right. So unfortunately for Huerta, Woodrow Wilson, and I want to remind you who this guy is. Remember, Woodrow Wilson, World War I president, the guy who put forward the 14 points. He influenced the Treaty of Versailles. This guy was a very forward-thinking president. I mean, it makes sense. He was a university president of Princeton before he became the president. And his ideology, his diplomacy was called moral diplomacy, as we had learned in the last series of lectures. He could not support a tyrant. And as soon as he found out that his ambassador played a role in killing the ex-president, he immediately dismissed him. He got a trusted associate to go and check out what the situation was in Mexico, and basically had to put ships into action, and he kept his soldiers in Veracruz to make sure if things got worse that he could at least intervene a bit. Things got worse, though. Huerta, as soon as the ships were now on Mexican territory, Huerta began spewing anti-United States rhetoric, and anybody that was basically publicly protesting against Huerta was immediately killed. It got so heated that Congress was eventually completely abolished. He tried to hold elections to give an air of legitimacy, but he intimidated the population so much that they, of course, voted for him but for not voting, they would have lost their lives. So after it got crazy like this, even Latin America and Europe could no longer support Huerta. He was pretty much going it alone, and he had a four-front war to get his head. So Woodrow Wilson instead supported the opposition, Venustiano Carranza, this bearded fellow who will do a lot for Mexico and most importantly create the 1917 Constitution. So here we can see a very angry-looking Huerta. I'll count the votes, it says in Spanish. Yeah, and you'll kill anybody who votes against you. Here's a more telling political cartoon. You can see the Mexican Congress. And who's behind them? It's the military. And he says, all in favor of my sticking, say aye. And then, of course, the military are the ones saying aye, and the poor population, the Congress, has no say. They were eventually abolished. Here we can see Woodrow Wilson trying to help in and maybe use some force in Mexico. He doesn't know what to do. He's trying to intervene. He knows the situation is bad, and he knows that millions of people are dying at the hands of Huerta. Here we can see some more cartoons regarding the American position during this time. You've got Uncle Sam refusing Huerta's blood-drenched hands. He did kill Madero. He did kill the VP. And here we can see Woodrow Wilson, a Princeton professor. We can have no sympathy with those who seek to seize the power of government to advance their own personal interests or ambition. None of that. There's a really funny one. You've got Mexico, trying to avoid taking the pacification pill that Uncle Sam is trying to offer, as he has offered to these great countries like Cuba and the Philippines and Nicaragua and Panama, who are also gentlemanlike and happy now and not completely bought by the Americans. Ha. So a really great mural right here. You guys remember that if you ever go to Mexico, there's an amazing muralist movement. We'll be talking about towards the end of the series. And they have a lot of great murals, big paintings of these heroes, these revolutionaries. And here's one of my favorite ones. It's Carranza putting the Constitution on top of Huerta. He is the one responsible for putting forward one of the most progressive constitutions of all time. A quick video on Wilson's lack of trust for Huerta here.
The news of Madero's assassination sends tremors across the country, releasing waves of hatred towards Huerta.
Cuando es asesinado Madero, lo que hace Victoriano Huerta es destapar los reclamos del pueblo, que ya no son el respeto al voto y estas cuestiones, sino que ya es el reclamo por todos los años de dictadura, por todo el cúmulo de injusticias que se habían forjado durante 30 años de dictadura.
With Madero out of the way, Ambassador Wilson has his wish. But he has a new problem. In Washington, Huerta's ruthless coup has created a crisis of confidence, and the ambassador's influence begins to slip. On March 4th, 1913, Woodrow Wilson becomes President of the United States. He summons Henry Lane Wilson to Washington and dismisses him as ambassador to Mexico. The Wilson administration refuses to accept Huerta's regime and begins to shift its support to the new alliance of revolutionary generals Carranza, Obregón, and Francisco Villa.
Francisco Villa logra reunir un contingente numeroso y gracias a sus éxitos, gracias a su liderazgo, todos los demás jefes van a terminar nombrándolo a él el líder de todas las fuerzas que habían surgido aquí en Chihuahua. Villa destaca muy pronto entre todos los jefes militares que surgen después del golpe de Estado militar de Victoriano Huerta y se convierte en jefe de la División del Norte y logra muchos triunfos. Pero aquí hay un factor que se tiene que tener muy presente. Villa era un jugador, le gustaba el azar. Muchas de sus grandes proezas no fueron fruto del cálculo meticuloso, seguro, Muchas acciones de Villa eran azarosas.
All right, and as you can see, he didn't have Wilson's trust, he didn't have anybody's trust, and he was about to face a four-front war. Let's pause for you to write down the last slide for today. All right. So Carranza will eventually organize a northern revolutionary movement, and he's going to try to push the southern rebels to join his cause. Check this out, the third plan you got to know. The first was called the Plan de San Luis Potosi, that was put forward by Madero. The second was Plan de Ayala by Zapata. Here's the third plan, the Plan of Guadalupe, put forward by Carranza, and it rejects Huerta as the president. It also says that once we get rid of this guy, Carranza will be the president until we hold elections. But just like Madero, he doesn't discuss reforms, land reform, labor reform, so not so many revolutionaries join his cause. They had learned their lesson from supporting Madero to no avail. Now, Huerta, with his amazing military, will chase Carranza deep into the Sonora state, which is northwest Mexico, and eventually he'll ally himself, Carranza will, with a man named Álvaro Obregón. You will know this name very well because this will be a future leader who will change Mexico for the better. Now, Villa fought Huerta from the north. We know that he hated both Madero and Huerta, and he had that army of 7,000, and he did very good. He won several battles in this period of the revolution, and the troops had to stay in the capital cities of each state. If they left into the rural areas, they were for sure going to get slaughtered. This is the federal government. Now, Zapata continued his battles in open rebellion right there in Morelos in the south, and now Obregón and Carranza were fighting from the northwest. The Americans were also on the coast in the east, so with the government collapsing, with everybody coming in, eventually Huerta tried to escape to the United States, where he would eventually die in prison for treason because he met with German spies. Let me remind you about the Zimmermann telegram. Remember during World War I that the Germans had sent a telegram to the Mexicans saying, hey, if you guys try and invade America, we will get you back all that that land that was stolen from you guys in the Mexican-American War. It was Huerta, now you know the context, who was the one that was in discussion with those spies. So here we can see the Plan de Guadalupe being written by Carranza, and it's pretty popular. There's even places named after the plan. Here we can see Carranza and Obregón together. Here he is with an arm, and eventually he lost his arm in one of the more important battles against Huerta. And here we can see Mexico City, where the government is. We've got America on the east coming in, Zapata on the south in Morelos. We've got Villa coming from the north. From the northwest, we've got Carranza and Obregón. Everybody's after his head, and he will eventually fall and die in the United States. Here we can see another mural. There's many murals to show you. We can see Carranza with that awesome beard over here. And all, you know, the Plan de Ayala, all these different plans, and all the revolutionaries fighting against Huerta. Horrible dude. Two more murals to show you, some pretty amazing ones. Here we can see Carranza. It's a bit blurry, but here's a much better one. You can see Carranza. His face is actually a train. And as I'll show you later when we talk about the I can't pronounce it correctly, soldaderas, female soldiers in Spanish, I can't say it, soldaderas. They're the ones that fought alongside the Northern Army, and they stayed behind and took care of the men and healed them. And this is a very amazing depiction of Carranza, both as a human and as a face form. I love that one. So two more videos. First I want to show you this one, The Fall of Huerta. It's a little short 2-minute one.
As Villa's popularity grows in Mexico and the U.S., Huerta's image withers. Washington senses that Huerta is about to betray the U.S.
In 1914, they heard that a German ship carrying arms for Huerta was to land in Veracruz. To prevent these arms from reaching Huerta, the United States decided to invade Veracruz.
On April 21st, 1914, warships of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet sail into the Mexican port of Veracruz. 3,000 U.S. Marines invade the city, overwhelming the Mexican forces. In the days that follow, hundreds of men, women, and children are killed in the crossfire. It will be 7 months before the U.S. Navy pulls out of Veracruz. In the short term, Huerta's popularity rises as he is able to rally broad national support against yet another invasion by the Americans. In central Mexico, Huerta faces his old revolutionary foe, General Villa. His federal army is devastated at the battles of Torreon and Zacatecas. Huerta is surrounded by enemies. Fearing for his life, he flees and boards a German ship bound for Spain. It is now July 1914, just weeks before World War I breaks out in Europe.
Okay, and now I'm going to show you one last video. This is kind of gangster. I couldn't cut the video up and put it inside, so I'm going to play it from here. Hopefully you can hear it. It's kind of gangster, but you'll at least see one of the battles of Villa. This is from a film called starring Pancho Villa as himself. He was actually filmed by Hollywood when he fought. So let's see if you can see it. Hopefully you can hear. That is Antonio Banderas.
Action, Señor Griffith. Action. Action. ¡Atención, soldados villistas! ¡Atención, revolucionario! ¡La hora del ataque ha llegado! ¡La hora de un México libre ha llegado! Lo que ven al frente no es Torreón, es el futuro, es el paz, es la libertad.
They're Huerta's men. They're the sorderas, the females waiting behind. Women did fight in the war. Almost 2 million people died in the Mexican Revolution. Anyways, it wasn't always a victory for Villa, but, you know, pretty fierce fighting there. I love finding a Hollywood rendition of this war. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time on the next stage of this battle.